All right. Hello, everyone. Okay. So, once again, we are back to talk about nationalism, right? Right. This is a continual topic that we're talking about, right? This is what the unit's about. Okay. And as we talk today, it's important that we continue to understand the difference between race, nation, and state. Okay. When we talk about states today, right? Remember, we're talking about states in Europe, not states in the United States, right? That means there's no power above them when we come to talk about them. So today, we're going to be talking about the unification of Italy, okay? And how they kind of start their nationalist movement, right? Like we're talking about this driving force that's starting to push them towards this idea of nationalism. All right. So today, right, we're going to start with talking about this island of Italy and where we're located. Okay. And, we're going to mention some people that we've talked about before, right? We're going to talk about their importance, why they're important to the situation we're talking about. Okay. So it's important for us to understand why Italy's deciding to do this and what factors are driving them to do this. Okay. So as we move forward, right, remember, hopefully we are taking notes during this, right, to keep us informed, right, so we have questions for when we get back to class, right? So Thursday, as we know, we talked about Mexico, we talked about the South Americas, right? We put these places on the map, right, to show us where they're at and why they're important, right? We showed you guys the ethnic map before, right, to help you give you guys an understanding of where these cultures are lying and why they're prominent in these areas. So this brings us to our first location here, right? So we have Italy, right? Most of us know where Italy's at, right? This is the boot, right? We're right in between France and the Austrian Empire. Okay, so they're going to be on that boot right there. Okay, so go ahead and write them down on there, right? But here's important, right? We see this boot down here, right? This little pointer at the end, right? Just a little bit northwest to that, right? A little east, right where that divot is. We're going to go ahead and put Rome on there for the capital, right? Rome, why would we put Rome? Well, Rome's the capital. And here's what's important about Rome to this conversation. So, as we know, the Roman Empire, right? This was a very, very, very important time in Italian history, right? Very powerful, right? Very good army. They're known for the Roman Empire, right? This is famous empire that we talk about, right? Well, Italy hasn't really been relevant since that, right? I mean, let's think about it. How often are we talking about Italy so far in class? Not a lot, right? So they haven't really been prominent since that time period, right? And they realize, they're starting to lose what they are, right? And they have a fight, right? They have this surge of nationalism, right? They're starting to get these ideas that are starting to brighten up in their head about, well, what's really going on here, right? What are we going to do to change this, right? Well, as we know, it starts with a little bit and it ends with a lot, right? We'll get into how they're starting to build upon this idea of nationalism in Italy, right? So if we move to our packets, here, we're going to go ahead and we're going to be on page 11 of the packet, right? And this, right, is the birth of Italian nationalism, right, and the leadership of the Kingdom of Sardinia, right? And we'll get into that. So I'm going to go ahead and give you guys some advice here that I think would make this part a little easier, right? I know in class I see a lot of you guys bring your highlighters out and stuff like that to help identify these places on the map, right? And I know you can see on the screen right now, we have 3 colors, or I guess 4 technically. But if you can, go ahead and get out 3 different colors. It doesn't matter which color, whatever suits you best. So here's what we're going to do. All right. So we're going to talk about this unification of Italy. So we're going to start on the left here, right? We have the kingdom of Sardinia, right, in Piedmont. Okay. This is controlled by ethnic Italians, right? And I'll get into this, man. I'm just giving us a brief introduction, right? This is controlled by ethnic Italians. Okay, that's important, right? Because if we think about the past, right, we think about Mexico too. It doesn't matter if you were born in the places that control these areas, right? The only thing that matters is if you're ethnic to that place. If you're from that place, that's what's important, right? That's what's important to them, is that they control these areas right here, right? That's where they're from, right? We move to the right. We have these three little places in red, right? So if you have your markers out, I don't know, if just so like on the left of your notes where it's there, just to give your guys self a better understanding of how these are separated, right? We have Lombardy, Venetia, and Tuscany, right? These three places, well, they're controlled by Austria. All right, we know of Austria recently, right? Because of the Congress of Vienna, right? They took control of the Congress of Vienna. Okay. Right. So they put themselves back in charge here. All right. So northern Italy, right? That area of northern Italy, this was controlled by Austrians, right? Right. This control that they had, this was restored to them during the Congress of Vienna. Okay. So then we move down, right? We have central Italy, right? That little area right there that says Papal States, right? Well, this state right here, right? When we think of papal, we know it's religious, right? Well, this was controlled by the Pope, right? But well, why is France over there? Well, France is protecting this papal area with their military, right? So France, they have control of this middle area called the Papal States, right? So this area is controlled by the Pope, protected by the French military, all right? Well, then we go down to the most famous part of Italy, the boot, right? This part, is most recognizable, right? That's how we know where Italy is because of this boot. Well, this area is controlled by Spain, okay? It's known as the Kingdom of Two Sicilies, right? This is controlled by Spain, all right? And as we know, Spain controlled some other areas too, right? We talked about the Americas. So this is important right here. Make sure you put this down in your notes right here. Right? We put down where these three places are controlled by. But we think back to the past, right? We think about these places we've talked about so far. Right? We've talked about Haiti. We've talked about Mexico. We've talked about South America, Brazil, and Poland, right? We've talked about 5 different places so far. Right? It's important that we write down and we understand who has control of these places before the nationalist movement, right? So we know Europe was kind of skewed around at this time, right? Different people owned different places, right? People had control over different areas because of certain things like the Congress of Vienna, right? So it's important that we notice for the rest of this unit what places control each other, right? Who has ownership of each of these places. So, right? So what I'm trying to show you guys is that this Italian peninsula, right? Along with the Italian nation up at the top, right? Well, these were divided amongst foreign rulers, right? What's issue number 1 with nationalism? Right? The presence of foreign power, right? The issues people have with foreign power, that is what comes with this idea of nationalism, right? These ideas that people are controlling these areas, well, that's what makes them mad, right? That's what upsets these people. So, that's what upsets these people is this idea that All right, let me start. Right. So nationalism, right? This is the idea that people control their own government, right? They don't want these foreign powers over them controlling what they do every day. So, right, so this moves us on, right? So, right, we have the kingdom of Sardinia, right? This is anchored, right? It's called Sardinia Piedmont, right? This is the region of northwestern Italy, right? Well, like I said, this was ruled by native Italians, right? Ethnic Italians. So it's only logical that the kingdom of Sardinia and Piedmont would eventually lead the movement that would drive these foreign powers from Italy and unite this one Italian nation, right? Unite them all, right? But under an Italian king, right? That's the goal. They want to unite them under an Italian king. They all want to have the same goal. Okay, they want to be united under an Italian king. Well, our question is, well, who can do that? Right? We'll get into that. Who's able to do that? So, this brings us to a gentleman that we've already talked about, right? We have Giuseppe Mazzini. Right? We've already talked about this gentleman, right? We talked about him the day that we talked about Young Europe, right? And if you guys are going back in your notes, right, Young Europe was this idea of these branches of nationalists spread across Europe, right? And their main goal was to start these nationalist revolutions, right? To push forth these nationalist movements in areas that needed it, right? So they would have different branches across Europe with a goal of starting a nationalist movement. Okay, so right, we see to the right of us, right, Giuseppe. We recognize him. We've talked about him, right? He's the father of nationalism. So we go to this picture on the right. Unione, Forza, Libertà, right? Well, this means union, strength, and liberty. So this leaves us, why is this important to nationalism? So, well, here's why, right? Union. We need to unite as one, right? So we talked about they want to come together. They want to create, one self-governing nation. Well, they need to unite together, right? But in order to do that, you need strength in numbers, right? You need individuals who support your cause. And that's what they're able to do here, right? They're able to unite as one, right, for this cause, right? But then liberty, right? They want freedom, right? They want freedom. They want to be free from this area, okay? They want to be free. They want to lead themselves and not be led by somebody else. Okay, so they want liberty, right? And they all have the right to this, right? This is what they're saying is this idea for them. Well, right, Giuseppe over here, our friend, he was one of the chief organizers, right, as I mentioned, of Young Europe, right? This was this national uprisings of 1848, right? So he hopes for this idea of an Italian republic. Italian republic? What does that mean? Well, this means that you come together, right, and become one self-governing union, right? That is his goal, okay? But how would we be able to do that? That's the question, right? And as we talked about, they need an ethnic Italian king, right? They need a king from Italy, okay? So they make a decision to revolt, right? And as we figured out from times previous to this, usually doesn't end well for those for the first time. So, like most results of this time, they lost, right? Their first battle that they attempted, they lost, okay? Right? They were beat by the Austrians and the French. And as we know, these ethnic Italians, these other Italians that joined in, they probably weren't well trained enough to be able to take on these giant, powerful, great, disciplined armies like the Austrians, like the French, right? They weren't prepared for that. Okay? So, well, then this leaves us with, if they're defeated, what happens to our friend Giuseppe here? Well, he's exiled, right? He leaves, he flees, right? He leaves to go somewhere else. He's exiled, right? He's not allowed there anymore. So, well, what's going to happen to young Italy here, right? Who's going to help, right? Who's going to lead this new nationalist movement that we have going on? Well, we'll get to that, right? So, we have this picture here, right? We still have the same map here. Okay, this is to give us an idea of who's who, where are we going, right? So, as we continue onto this idea of Italian unification, right? We have the map that shows us where people are located. Okay, so they decide on his successor. Okay, we have a picture right here in the middle, right? Il Risorgimento. Okay, right? This is a newspaper, right? A publication. Okay, well, they choose their successor, right? The leader of this new nationalist movement, right? Well, they choose the publisher of this newspaper, right? So he's a publisher, right, of this newspaper. And in English, that means the resurgence. Well, what do we mean by a resurgence? Well, they want a resurgence of this Italian way, right? This nationalist movement. They want a resurgence, right? They want to bring it back in Italy. They want their power back. They want their control back, right? So that's their goal. They want to bring this back. Okay, they need a resurgence, right? We think about surge, it's just this big, powerful, like electric surge is just right there, just right. It's all in this one place. Okay, well, they want to bring that back to Italy, right? So, our friend over here, right, his replacement is Camillo de Cavour. Okay, and he's chosen to be this successor, right? Well, he's from Sardinia and Piedmont, right? That's where he's from. Right? We've talked about this. That's where he's from. It's an important part, right? This is where all the ethnic Italians are from. So he, like many others in this area, he was a strong advocate of a united Italian state rule, right? He wanted all the Italians to unite and rule together, right? This is what he was a strong advocate for, right? That's what he would write about in this newspaper, right? But what's important to know about this newspaper is it's a nationalist newspaper, right? A nationalist publication, right? So their bias was towards nationalism, right? And we see that a lot today, right? You look at news, certain news stations have bias towards different political sides, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But that's sometimes just how things are, right? Well, that's how his newspaper is, right? He writes it with this nationalist viewpoint of what he believes should be going on in Italy, right? He's writing about what he believes Italy should be like right now, right? So how does this idea of a united Italian state support nationalism? Well, if they're all united, right, and they're living together under one rule, that would be nationalism, right? They're getting away from this foreign power and they're supporting each other and living under the same rule. Well, we have our friend over here, King Victor Emmanuel II. Well, he gets hints of this newspaper, right? He's reading them, right? And he's reading about how they want an ethnic Italian to be king, right? He's reading about what they want out of nationalism. Well, Emmanuel's sitting here reading this. He's like, that's me. I'm an ethnic Italian. I'm a king. I can do that. Right? So he volunteers, right? Why wouldn't he? He's reading what they want and he knows he fits that. So he's like, yeah, I can do that. Right? He was their natural choice, right? He was a king of Sardinia and Piedmont, right? He was just their natural choice for this position, right? He was naturally Italian, right? He agreed with most of the stuff that Camillo de Cavour was saying, right? But they need him just as much as Camillo. Camillo needs King Victor just as much as King Victor needs Camillo. right? We'll get into that, right? And I'll put it in a way that might be a little bit more easier for you guys to understand, right? Think of this as Emmanuel basically had this brand new nice Lamborghini, right? Nice expensive car, beautiful, has everything he needs, right? But the only issue is King Victor Emmanuel has no clue how to drive, right? No clue how to drive. Well, he meets Camilo. Thing about Camilo is that he has the keys, right? He knows how to drive. He has the keys, but he doesn't have a car, right? He doesn't have an outlet to put this nationalist stuff into movement, right? So they need each other, right? King Victor doesn't know the nationalist movement like Camilo does, right? But Camilo doesn't have the power to be the king and lead, right? So they need each other to be successful and be cohesive and create this unit, right? So they need each other, right? And he was the only one that really understood this nationalist movement, right? So things happen, right? King Victor then is where he needs to be, right? And he elects, or he puts Camilo de Cavour into the power of prime minister, right? He puts him in charge, makes him prime minister. All right. So this leaves us off here as now they are unified, right? They now are taking a step into nationalism, right? And we'll figure out later on how they succeed in this or what happens with them, okay? But it's important. They've taken the steps to get to a good spot to start their battle for nationalism. All right. See you guys.